This video we'll be talking about finding or creating openings. I just have two clips, should be pretty short, but I thought it was pretty important because I see a lot of people get stuck in these areas. So this first clip is the Favelas versus Supernova. We can see it's a 3v5 at this point, and in reality, 3v5 you might win this, 1 out of 5 times, 1 out of 10 times just by gunning. But essentially, you're gonna have to do something to create an open. That's what we're talking about, finding or creating an opening in this case. And I thought this was a really cool play. I didn't get to focus on it too much at the time because I was covering Supernova in that VOD. So I thought we could talk about it a little bit, but anyway, so like we see 5v3, minute 15 seconds left. They're going for a double flank, which is pretty unpredictable. You wouldn't expect it a lot of times, so we can just kind of watch through and talk about it. And something else to note is that they're taking it pretty quickly. Sometimes when I see teams flank, like look how quick they're going for this. Sometimes when I see teams flank, they take it very, very slow. And in this case, they're recognizing that because they left site, there's only one guy on site, so they have a very limited window of opportunity here to make this play because we don't know if they're droning or anything like that. So if they are droning, or we can assume that they're droning, then they're going to find out pretty quick that there's only one guy in the area or one guy on site, and then this is going to turn sideways real quick because they left site. So this is something that has to be done pretty aggressively, and I see a lot of teams like kind of just, I don't know, creep walk all the way across the map, taking it super slow. So that was something I wanted to touch on specifically. But you can see how aggressive this is. So this is all happening in seconds. And so we can see they go at 114. It's 5v3. All right, and then at 56 seconds, it's a 2v2. So for one, this play was a high risk, high reward play, but it paid off, right, in terms of evening out the numbers. So this is much more, and again, we're always talking about mentality of the game, right? This went from a 5v3, I should do it the other way, 3v5, right? And so when you're thinking about mentality, like there's a lot of pressure on the Favelas here, if you think about it, because obviously every round counts. You want to win this round. This is match point round. So I mean, even if they lose, they're probably going to be okay. But it's just like stuff that you don't want to deal with. So if you can win here, why would you not? And so there is some pressure because they're severely outgunned. There's a lot of time on the board. They decide to make this play. It obviously pays off because in the matter of 20, 25 seconds, somewhere in there, they evened out the numbers. So mentality wise, they went from probably being slightly down to rising up, right? Because now it's a 2v2 and they were doing really good, and maybe their mentality in this case has gone slightly down because now it's like, wow, we were 5v3, how did this happen? How are we here at this point, right? So you can talk about, like, for one, it's a high risk, high reward play, but in terms of mentality, it's a huge play. All right. And so the other thing to see is that they're going to play together. They didn't push separately, right? One didn't come down yellow and one didn't come down spiral or anything like that. They're pushing together, and they're timing this together. This is team coordination, right? I always talk about that, but they're staying together, so they're in places that they are hitting at the same time. So, and this is where, like, they're probably, I've already watched this VOD, but we can assume that Favela's comms are possibly better here because we can see that the Ash is looking this way, then the Ash is going to look this way, and then when we see the Ace die in a sec, he's going to be looking this way. So this, in my mind, means that they're not using their comms correctly because they're not telling each other who's watching what. They're not set up in positions where they can effectively support each other, and they're probably a little stressed out at this point. But we can see how good their timing is. So he goes down first, but because they timed it correctly, the Malusi Gomez here is swinging around the corner and getting the pick right away. So it's an even trade. And so you can see how this is where the comms come into play is like, where is the Ash looking? And is the Ash sharing that information with their team? And then you can see that where the Ace is looking, and is that information being shared with his team? Because you got to think that if the Ash is over here, their biggest line of sight is that way, right? Looking towards security, not towards, because of the wall, there's no holes here. They can't, unless he's up on the pillar still, he can't see the door. So that means that in my mind, the Ace needs to be looking towards his biggest vulnerability, which is this side. So you can see that they already by that flank created big openings for themselves. They get the pick, and then they get this res, which is not really sure, and that's based on intel on the team. Is not really sure why the Ash allowed this to happen, because automatically now your numbers are against you. Gets one, and then loses the fight. So we could see it went from a 5v3 in about to a 2v2 in about 25 seconds ish, somewhere in there. So that's what we're talking about. They created an opening for themselves. They didn't just wait for gunfights to come to them, and most likely, like we talked about, maybe 1 out of 5 times, 1 out of 10 times you might win a 3v5, but so they took matters into their own hands, and they took a chance, they went for a play, and they made an opening for themselves, and it turned out to be successful, and they end up winning that round. So I thought that was a good example. And then this match happened yesterday. I watched this round specifically, thought it was so good. And we can see in this one, 5v5, 27 seconds left. I mean, we're really in crunch time now, and going for a plant is just so scary in a 5v5 situation. So we can watch and see how they push in and create opening and space for this plant. All right, so what we see happening here is that he's throwing his Candelas, and it's not necessarily, we can assume, or I assume anyway, it's not necessarily to get kills. It's to create space so that they can get in and plant. Because when he throws his Candelas in, that allows them, sorry, wrong side, them to push in and start the plant, right? Because the TSM is, blinded or can't move forward until the Candelas have, expired, and then they can move forward at that point. And we can see the plant starting. Last Candela's out. And because of the Candela, and they know the plant is going down, it puts him in a weird position where he's completely vulnerable, and really no one else is able to support him in this position, right? Because of those Candelas. He gets picked solo. Now we can see, so it went from a 5v5 to a 2v4, right? And that's because of the use of utility there. It forced them either to back up in order to plant, and then that saving that third one is really what I think created the opening for them, because that third one is forced the Jaeger to try and deny the plant, but he could only push by himself, right? No one else could push with him because of it. Plant is down, 1v2. And they win the round. So we could see it was 27 seconds, 5v5. They created an opening for themselves in that crunch time. They got the plant down. This is the type of stuff where team coordination comes into play. Is there's times where your team is going to get stuck, and you've got to either find or create openings, whether you're attack or defense, it doesn't matter. And some of this, this stuff isn't going to work every time, right? It's not, especially that flank in the last clip, it's not going to work every time, but it's just something that has to happen, because you can't just when you're in a 5v3, for example, you can't really just sit around and wait for them to just totally overwhelm you, right? You've got to make an opening for yourself and try to even out those numbers. And those are those times where you probably got to get a little bit aggressive and try to even out the numbers and get the picks, which is what they did. And in this one, we see it was a 5v5. Time was ticking, and that means that time is in the favor of the defense TSM. and they had to create and force an opening for themselves in order to plant. So I thought this was some good stuff to cover. These were two pretty good clips. Obviously, one's Challenger League, one's Pro League. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day.